I don't come from the global south, so I wonder what I'm doing here. I come from a country which is trying to spread democracy all around the world, because, as you know, the United States is the center of democracy. In the United States, it's the democracy of money that really matters. Actually, Mark Twain, over 100 years ago, said that the United States has the best government that money can buy. And it continues to be that way. I think if you look at the last election, one of the vehicles that made sure that Obama won was that he had almost twice as much money as the Republicans. So, actually, I have to say, in the United States, democracy has also been a disaster. Not in the same way as in Kenya, but certainly disastrous in many other respects. And of course, the interesting thing is that the Supreme Court decided back in the 1970s that spending money on elections was protected under the constitutional amendment that guaranteed freedom of speech. Ever since then, I've been trying to get into conversation with my $20 bill, and it never replies. So I'm not in a good position to speak to you about what democracy should be about, and I think that some of the things that are happening in Latin America and Africa and East and South Asia are actually more interesting than anything that we have going for us in North America, and we can probably learn a great deal from you. But what I thought I would do very briefly is to just make a very, very general suggestion as to how to situate our understanding of democracy in relationship to the general processes of social change. And I'll preface this with a brief story that about 3 years ago I was invited to chair a jury on new ideas for a new city to be built in South Korea. And we went to the place and had a discussion with the jury members as to how to think about what a new city should look like and what standards of thinking we should engage in. And the discussion was initially dominated by architects and urban designers, a Japanese architect called Isozaki, a Dutch architect designer William Ass. And they got into a very deep conversation about the relative strengths of squares and symbols and circles as spatial forms that would be best to accommodate a new city structure. And I got impatient with this at some point, and I said, well, I think we should look at 6 different aspects of this new city. The first is to ask what kind of relation to nature is being proposed. The second is to say what kind of new technologies are going to be embedded in this city, technologies of production, of consumption, transportation and the like. The third is to say what kind of social relations are going to be here, how are people going to relate to each other. The fourth was what systems of production are going to be orchestrated in this space, and how are those systems of production going to be organized, in what ways. The fifth was questions of the social relations, and the sixth was about mental conceptions of the world and daily life. What would daily life look like? And what I argued was that we needed to think about these elements in interaction with each other, and that we should not choose any one of them as being, if you like, the thing that was going to define what the city should be about. And we should imagine that the city would grow over time as each one of these elements actually moved and changed, as mental conceptions changed, as technologies changed. So there's a dynamic, if you like, in the evolution of the city. And we had a very interesting discussion on that for about 15 to 20 minutes. And then Isozaki said, well, I think this is all very interesting, but only one of these elements really counts, and that's the mental conceptions. And of the mental conceptions, the symbolic dimension is crucial, and that brings us back to circles and squares. So we went back to discussing circles and squares. Later on, people asked me, they said, well, it's a very interesting formulation, where did that come from? And I said, well, actually, it's footnote 4 in chapter 15 of Marx's Capital, volume 1. Now, there's a very funny thing that happens to you when you say something like that. The first thing is, many people look over their shoulder, like, Marx is in the room. Oh my God. Something terrible is going to happen. I'm going to lose my job. Fear overcomes me. The second thing is they look at you like you're an idiot because all you do is just quote Marx. And in this case, even worse, you quote a footnote in Marx. But actually, this is a very interesting way to think about social change. And if you look at actually how Marx wrote about the transition from feudalism to capitalism, it involved a co-evolution of all of those elements. That is, the technology had to change, the mental conceptions had to change,